Welcome to the 17:6 podcast, where we help you turn the world upside down by the Lordship of Christ. I'm Trevor.
I'm Caleb.
I'm Zach.
That was really seamless. I was prepared for the camera change. I wasn't even looking at it. I've worked on my peripheral check this week, like just been practicing. Like, what can I see? How far is my peripheral? So I just lined up. I just noticed in my peripheral that he changed cameras. It felt really good. Take that, Amos.
Have you ever watched other podcasters and like they shift to how
I've also
they
been
shift
taking
the cameras?
I've been taking notes.
Okay.
Well, he does it. No, he doesn't tell me when he's going to do
That's
it.
true,
Like
no.
he sets it up to try to mess me up.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel
You
really
should
good.
just shift.
I feel good about it today. I know next episode he's going to try really hard.
It
but
looked good.
What do you think about that one? What are you gonna do about that?
I'm just going to stare at a camera.
See,
it's okay,
That's the perks of being in the middle. Is it doesn't really matter where I look.
except when you got a runny nose and you're like, oh no, oh no. Well, at least you got a
That's
mustache.
why I wasn't here last week.
Yeah, you got a mustache.
Yeah.
And it'll just catch it. Like, boy,
Yeah.
you're sweating. No, no, I'm sure not. So
Tough.
yeah, so we're gonna go over Acts 23. I know, but before we get there, I'm sure you have something to tell us.
I do. Zach, have you heard about the price of chimneys?
I have not heard about the
They're
price of chimneys.
through the roof.
Ooh, that's good. That's good.
Great job. Great
I
job.
like that one.
That's good.
Glad you're back.
Glad to be back.
Yeah.
It's great to be back.
Yeah. Well, good. So tell us about Acts 23, Caleb.
So Acts 23, kind of how we, how it's broken up here is, so in the first section we have Paul before the council, and Paul makes some kind of harsh and hasty comments.
Oh, the buzz is not.
The buzz is back.
Oh my gosh. Okay. We're
Am
back.
I good? You can everybody hear me?
Yeah. That
I can
won't-
hear you.
Okay, all right.
That won't be edited.
And then, yeah, no, we don't. So, yeah, first section, Paul before the council, and Paul makes some harsh and hasty comments. And then the second section, we have a plot to kill Paul.
dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Where the Jews plan to starve themselves. But before they can starve themselves, Paul is secretly shuffled away. And then we don't know what happened.
Yeah.
We'll get into that.
Right.
So, and then the final section, we have where Paul is shuffled away to, where he's shuffled off.
Yeah, that sounds good. Shuffle.
He's shuffled off to Felix, the governor.
All I got in my mind is there's a dance number in the middle of 23 as they're shuffling away. We talked about Monty Python before the episode.
We did,
Now,
yeah.
That's all I. Okay. Not good. Not good.
Yeah. So that's that's kind of how Acts 23 is broken down.
Right. We're gonna spend a lot of time probably just in a few verses.
Yes.
And I mean,
Yeah.
there's probably a lot of good stuff in Acts 23, but for some reason we've just zeroed in on verses 3 through 5. There's a lot of application here, and mainly it's really tough. This is a really tough episode for me, as I got a lot of repenting to do.
Yep.
I don't know about you guys.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel really cool. I felt really cool during the election, and I said some silly things and ridiculed some high officials. And I read Acts 23 and I'm like, I got to rethink a lot of the things that I say and the dishonor that I have. So that's what we'll get into. And I think that's where we're going to spend most of our time. And if it feels like scripture is punching you in the gut, well, good. That's great. The Holy Spirit's working. So that's, yeah. But we'll start in with verse 1.
Yep.
And I think you got something.
So Paul looks at the council. He looks intently at the council, and he says, "Brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day." And I just wanted to point that out because I think there's a lot of times where we have this, how we define humility is that we can never admit that we did something well, or that we have a good conscience, or we've lived rightly before God. There's something, I think, especially in our Protestant view, that we always want to highlight the corruption or the inadequacies we have.
It's the tea and tulip.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the total depravity. We are a wretch. We're
Yeah.
not good. We can't do anything right. But then we forget that we're redeemed. And
Right.
you know
yeah.
what?
Yeah. And I was talking to you guys earlier. I had to do an evaluation of myself at work recently. and it was a scale of 1 to 10, right? How are you on this? How are you on this? And I know there's one of the ones that's kind of awkward is you have to rate yourself on your humility. And if a guy rates himself a 10 out of 10 on humility, is he really humble? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. That's a trick question. But if you rate yourself as a 1 on humility, are you just trying to show that you're humble?
Super humble. Super
then,
duper
then
humble.
if you're trying to show that that you're humble, are you really humble?
Right.
So just play it safe and go with a 5.
Yeah.
That was my approach.
Just sit on that fence.
So my approach was like, man, I kind of feel like my actions would show that I would score higher, but that would seem very prideful and arrogant. So I scored myself lower. And I hadn't given like as much thought as I should have. But now that I'm over here, like I think Paul would have scored himself pretty high.
Yeah.
I mean, Paul has the audacity to tell people, hey, follow me, do what I'm doing because I'm following Christ. And you see that here with, hey, I've lived with a good conscience before God up till this day. Like he has that kind of boldness. I think of Moses and what is it? It's the book of Exodus saying that he was the most humble man in all the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a funny line.
Yeah, it is. It is. So that is hard to say that, we can live a clean conscience to God. I honestly have no issue scoring myself high on self-evaluations. Back when I worked in corporate America, silly. Back when I had a job and I wasn't a business owner, we had self-evaluation. I just rated myself as a 5 on everything. I'm like, my boss needs to do his job, so I'm going to rate myself as a 5. And
Out of 5.
out of 5, absolutely. Top notch.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Earlier, whenever I said I would have rated you a 5, I didn't know it was on a scale of 10.
Yeah, I felt really.
So I would have given you 10s. I want to.
Oh, thank you so much, Caleb.
Oh, I would have rode the fence on the humble question.
On the humble question?
Yeah, just ride the fence because you're like, well, I don't know. This is a trick question. Anyway. Yeah, we should be okay with saying that we're living toward a holy life. We can say that and not be so, oh, woe is me. I'm terrible.
Yeah.
I'm wicked.
So this is probably the closest we're going to see to someone having self-confidence in the Bible and it being a good thing, where Paul has an accurate view of himself. And because he has been devoted to living in a way that's pleasing to God, he can actually say, I've lived in a way that's pleasing to God.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. So good to move on to the actual section here.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to read verses 3 through 5, if that's okay, just to kind of get the context of what's going on. All right. So Paul is within the council of these Jewish leaders. Okay. Verse 3, Acts 23, verse 3. Then Paul said to him, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law, and yet contrary to the law, you order me to be struck? Those who stood by said, would you revile God's high priest? And Paul said, I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people.
Before we actually get into the subject matter itself, can I just point out that a lot of why Paul is in trouble right now is because they perceive that he is getting away from Moses and the law of Moses. And here he is being corrected by the law of Moses, and it's like on him, right?
Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah, like I know this law out of Exodus and I need to repent and correct myself based on this law. I just think the irony is very evident,
Yeah, absolutely. So Paul is saying, so his quote is that he says that it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. And so that's what Zach was saying. That's Exodus 22, 28. Is that right? Yeah. So that's the question. What the heck? Can we not speak evil? We're not to speak evil of our ruler. Exodus 22, 28 actually says, you should not curse a ruler of your people. So I think we should take that into consideration too, cursing our rulers. That's hard.
Yeah. So do we want to start off by maybe doing a bit more of an examination of what Paul said to the high priest?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So he starts off with, and the way I split it up is there are 3 things in his statement. The first one is God is going to strike you. And I think to understand what Paul is doing here, he's not making a predictive judgment in the sense like, hey, all those who refuse to repent and turn to Christ will be judged. He's not making a comment like that. This is the word that you used earlier. This is a curse.
Yes. Yeah. Following Exodus 22:28, I think this would be a curse, calling God's wrath on somebody of their own will. Like, I don't like you, so I'm calling God's wrath on you. I'm calling a curse upon you.
Right. So that's the first thing. He curses the high priest. Second thing, he calls him you whitewashed wall, which would be an insult, something similar to name calling.
Right.
That's the second thing. So you have any comments on that?
I would, we don't have to talk about it right now, but it would be difficult to say Paul was in the wrong. Maybe it's difficult to say if Paul's in the wrong if we see Christ doing the same thing in Matthew.
Right. And we definitely need to address that.
Yeah. So just put a pin in that.
Yeah.
To think about that. Don't think that we're skipping over what Jesus has said.
Right.
We will talk about that.
Right. And the third thing is he gives an indictment of them. So that's where he says, hey, contrary to the law, you order me to be struck. So he's accusing them of breaking the law, basically.
Right. So that's what's going on. Paul has cursed a ruler. He's spoken evil of the ruler and then tried to tell them that they've broken the law. So should we go back to maybe that speaking evil and paralleling that with what Jesus has said to show that maybe Paul is definitely in the wrong here.
Yeah.
According to Exodus 22:28.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have Jesus saying the same thing. It's in these woes in Matthew 23. He has these woes that he's giving to the Pharisees. Like, woes you Pharisee, you whitewashed tomb. I think he uses tomb in that section. So was Jesus incorrect in that judgment or that quote unquote, I don't even name calling, but is it different there?
Insult. Yeah.
Insult. Is it different there?
I think it is different. I think one of the distinctions we have to make, because first off, I'll just start off with the Jesus, Matthew 23 section. Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees, but he is also, I think it's important to realize that Jesus is also a Jewish rabbi. He's a religious leader as well. At most, he would be making statements to those who are lateral to him.
Right.
He is not speaking to his rulers. He's speaking to those on the same level.
So if Paul would have made this statement to other Pharisees, probably would not have been in the same category because Paul considers himself a Pharisee. Right. Later in the verse.
That brings up a really good point because as you look at Exodus 22:28, we Americans, because we live in an egalitarian culture, and I don't mean that in the theological men women thing, that conversation. I mean in the sense that we place a lot of emphasis on the fact that our president and our governors and our mayors are human just like me. We're all on the same level. Right. This is not true among other cultures, and people who have gone on mission trips and gone to those other cultures, it's very evident that there's a larger gap between leaders and the lay people, basically.
Maybe it's we've lost a sense of what honor is in our society because we think everybody is the same. They're just humans. We hear that all the time. But there is a type of honor that you should be showing a different type of people.
Right.
I think so.
Yeah.
We see it, like you said, in other cultures, but I think we've lost that sense here.
Yeah.
And that could be a reason why it's a hard time for us.
There is something for us to learn from those other cultures because of passages like this, where the proper interpretation of, that I would argue, is that there are some things you can say to some people that you should not say to rulers.
Right.
So for Jesus to call the Pharisees, whom are not his religious leaders or civil leaders, to call them whitewashed tombs is acceptable. To call the high priest that is unacceptable.
Right. There's a hierarchy of honor there.
So it's not just don't ever speak evil or curse anybody.
Right.
Because we see Elijah doing that to the prophets of Baal. He starts making fun of them.
Yeah.
So there's a place for mocking and insulting and that kind of thing.
Right.
Not done, flippantly or anything like that.
Right.
But there's a place for that, but never for leaders.
Exactly. So we should definitely be examining the way that we speak to leaders and, just leaders in our life. So that's not saying though that we can't tell the truth and rebuke them. That's not what Paul is saying. If there is a leader who is evil, you can say in a critical way that's not insulting what they are doing is evil. That's not what we're saying. You can absolutely say that.
Yes, I think what Paul is getting at here and what Moses was getting at from Exodus is that you may not demean a leader, but you may rebuke a leader. And we see examples of that. I mean, you think of the prophet Nathan approaching King David, and he rebukes King David. You think of John the Baptist rebuking
Herod.
Yeah, King Herod.
Yeah.
I mean, and in no uncertain terms. Like it is definitely it would not have felt good to be the king.
Exactly.
And in the sense of, or the time of King Herod, I mean, that kind of leads to John being beheaded.
Exactly.
So it's not to say that they had to be soft in the rebuke. Like the rebuke is still
Hard.
Yeah.
But it didn't dishonor the role that those people were in.
Right.
It didn't dishonor the kingship. So
Yeah.
that's what we have to consider. They still approach them with a type of respect. So it's interesting because in Exodus 22:28, I just made this connection, maybe there's not a connection here, that it starts out with, you shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. So there's a double thing going on here. And I think this brings up maybe a question. Do you want to talk about your question right now? Or maybe it's too early?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just had talked about before the episode that maybe the reason, I guess, you shall not speak evil of a ruler is authority of the rulers is given by God, right?
God has ordained their position.
God has ordained their position. So if God has ordained their position, no matter who it is,
Yeah.
shouldn't demean that.
You'd be making fun of God's guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, you should extrapolate that to the most extreme. Like,
Right.
think about, like, we're not just saying,
Let's just go all the way.
yeah, what about Hitler? Like
Joseph Stalin.
Exactly. So that's hard. That's hard to conceptualize about mocking, right? Like that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it's saying. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we're misunderstanding what's going on here, but
It seems pretty straightforward.
right.
Yeah, I do think that, and I don't know if this is like particularly for Americans, but I know it's very natural for us to get into that demeaning leaders mentality. And even over the last week and a half, as I've been meditating on this, I have found myself having to bite my tongue a lot.
Right. Yeah. Again, we're not saying that you can't call out what is wicked. Like, we're not saying be silent and don't say something is evil. We're saying don't demean, don't name call.
Yeah.
Rulers. That's where the issue is.
Do you think that includes like bosses?
So I think yes, but I would go to a different text in the New Testament where Paul talks about masters and slave owners. I think we get a better representation
Okay.
of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think you're wrong. But
Right.
yeah, that's where I'd go. I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, yeah, I think it has a wide application. So it applies to religious leaders, civil leaders, but yes, in the context of business, yeah, anyone who's in that position of authority, we have to give respect there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, hopefully my my employee's listening to that. No, I'm joking. He's great. He's great. So what then, what does that mean for us? My mind goes to the whole let's go Brandon thing. As Christians, it's super easy to say. I mean, as for me, I don't know. I can't speak for all Christians, but for me, that's really easy to say. But reading this verse now, like I'm condemned. Like I need to repent, you know, of those types of things.
And I have also made similar comments that I'm in the same boat. I have got to repent and change a lot of how I speak about leaders, in particular whenever it's someone that is on the opposite side of the aisle than you, right?
Right, exactly. And we are, I think you just briefly mentioned this, but I do want to kind of maybe talk about it a little bit more. We're not just talking about civil leaders or just religious leaders. We're talking about religious and civil government leaders. Like it's every leader that's in a high authority. And
I would almost say it's gonna be easier for me to apply this in the civil sphere, but the religious sphere, that's gonna be a lot more difficult for me to bite my tongue on.
Right.
I have a question for you guys. Do you think it's easier to rebuke someone that is on the same side of the fence as you, as opposed to someone who opposes you. It's easier to demean that person.
I totally, yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
It is.
It's easier to demean someone on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if they're on the same side of the fence, you want to rebuke them to bring correction to them. If they're on the opposite side of the fence, you're almost in the position of like, man, they're so far gone. All I can do is just make fun of them.
You want to ridicule them.
Yeah.
You want to ridicule them into oblivion.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
But what we're saying is we shouldn't be doing that, right?
Right.
Live respectable lives.
Yeah.
As a Christian, like we need to be known as Christians, not as people who demean other
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah. So we need
Just for clarity, is there any application here that is there any difference if we're talking about civil leaders that are a Christian versus not a Christian?
can we judge them differently? Maybe like, what do you,
I don't know. Just just for clarity's sake, I guess we should treat them the same either way, I suppose.
with honor? I think there should be a type of honor and respect. It should be the same for sure. I think that's a good question. Yeah.
I think I would treat them exactly the same. I'm thinking of like going back to the John the Baptist thing. He held, first off, in his rebuke, he held King Herod to the standard of God's law.
Right.
He had taken his brother's wife, and that's what he was getting rebuked for. That just goes to show that, I guess a non-Christian was being held to Christian standards. Is what I'm getting at there.
Yeah.
But it was done in a respectful way.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm asking then is, are we honoring the man or are we honoring the position, the office?
I kind of go to the office, and then the guy that's filling the office gets that honor and respect.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, cool.
One quick, maybe not quick, I'm not sure.
that's fine.
So one of the things that I wanted to wrestle through was, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. So one of the questions that came up as we were discussing this is, can you speak evil of other people's rulers, or is it
Right.
specifically the ruler of your people?
Right. That's pretty difficult.
Yeah. So if it's a pastor of someone else, like a different church,
Right.
can I speak evil of that or curse that person, or a governor of a different state, or a president of a different country, so on and so forth?
Yeah. Man, that's I think it's difficult to wrestle through because for people in, we'll just say Southwest Missouri, because that's where we're at, really easy to poke fun at Gavin Newsom in California because he's not our governor. He has no authority over anybody in Missouri that I'm aware of. I mean, I don't know. There might be a conspiracy out there that I'm unaware of. But it's really funny to make fun of him. However, I have to think that there's still that he's still an authority, and those are still our people in a sense in California. I don't know. I'm working through this right now.
Right.
Trying to. I would still have to show him honor and respect. I would call him wicked for the wicked things that he's doing, or unwise things. But after reading this verse, I would be very hesitant to do any type of name calling or degrading.
Yeah. Kind of where I have landed on this. And for the listeners, to be clear, I've been wrestling with this for about a week and a half, which for me is nowhere near enough time to actually comfortably land on certain issues. But here's just my practical, I have to make a decision today on how I'm going to behave, and here's where I'm landing with it. I know for sure, like with 100% certainty, that on Judgment Day, I will not be condemned for having not condemned, cursed, or insulted a ruler of another people.
Right.
I know for sure that is permissible as long as I am holding them to the standard of God's word. So rebuking is allowed, and not just allowed, but it's a good thing to rebuke. But there's a chance that even a ruler of another people, I could be judged for having insulted them. Therefore, it is wise in my judgment to not partake in that.
Right.
Basically playing it safe. I know for sure this is not bad. This might be bad, so let's not even do it.
Exactly. So, because you never know where the Lord is going to put you. What if you're imprisoned and brought before the governor of California, or maybe you're in a position with, I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there because we see Paul. This is exactly how Paul is, or how God is working in Acts to bring Paul to Rome. It's through imprisonment. And I'm not saying that's the only way, but, or what if you're in a position to where you meet another pastor of another church that you've made fun of? Like, how is that going to help the cause of turning the world upside down by the lordship of Christ? All that's going to do is they're just going to look at you and cast you off as someone that doesn't know anything. But if you're respectable and have shown honor to their position, you're probably going to get more of a word. Your words are going to weigh more in on their mind.
That's really good.
All right.
Yep. So we have publicly repented, and if you go find previous videos of ours, there might be things that we would regret saying now.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So that is the, I guess, the end of that discussion. So let's finish up. Boy, that took a lot longer. It took a lot longer than I expected. So let's, I guess, hurry through Acts 23 now.
Let's do it.
Let's see if I can gather myself.
Talk about the Jews starving themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. Can we jump into verse 6 just for a minute?
Yes.
All right. So Paul is in front of a lot of Jews, but he perceives that one part of this council is Sadducees and one part is Pharisees. And I just wanted to pull out that if we're wanting to be wise people who turn the world upside down, it's important for us to understand the distinctions between groups, because Paul is going to use this to his advantage.
Yes.
As he gets in front of them, first off, he says, brothers, I am a Pharisee, which just means he just identified with the Pharisee group.
Exactly.
He looked at two different groups in front of him and said, it's going to be to my advantage to side with and align with the Pharisees in this moment.
Yes.
Which is funny because obviously in a lot of situations, he would not have aligned with the Pharisees.
Exactly.
But it was to his advantage to do it this time. And the reason for that is because he says it is with respect to the hope and the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial. So let's just go ahead and point out the fact that this hope that Paul is talking about is the resurrection of the dead. And you're going to see this through the rest of Acts. And almost every time he gets in front of a leader or he's presenting his case, he talks about this hope of the resurrection of the dead. And just the fact for him, the hope is not going to spend forever in heaven, but instead his hope is based on Christ coming back and the resurrection of the dead.
Yes.
That's going to be the big thing. But the reason he brings this up is to intentionally divide the council that he's in front of. He knows the Sadducees do not believe in that. So if he brings this up, he can get the attention off of himself and onto this theological controversy.
Exactly.
And this is a wise move by the Apostle Paul.
Yeah. So we should then know who our opponents are, where they divide over. We should know how to, just know how maybe to divide them when we need to divide them.
Right.
So know your opponents. That's pretty much all I had there.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah. And so when Paul did this, it's crazy that it was that point that it makes them so emotional that they're like going to tear Paul to pieces. Right. But he's saved. So verse 11, this isn't where he's saved, but verse 11, we're seeing the prophecy for Paul in Acts chapter 9, verse 15 being fulfilled, meaning that he's going to speak to kings and he's going to go to Rome. So,
and this is probably not the path that he thought would get him there.
Right. This is God working in ways that we wouldn't expect.
Yeah. You're going to speak to kings and you're thinking like, sweet, I'm going to go to the banquet. I'm going to be at his, feasting at his table,
Right.
Not in chains in front of him.
Exactly.
Does anybody have anything mentioned in verse 11? Or are we not
That's
there
where
yet?
I was. No, that's where I was.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. We can go to that next section. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So just to bring back what I think Luke's point of writing the book of Acts is showing how, like, what is the history of the gospel turning the world upside down. And I think for Luke, a big deal is it hitting Rome, because Rome is like the center of the empire,
Right.
Not geographically, but
Yes.
As far as influence. And so that's why he's going to keep bringing this point back. And that's why the story, as we get closer to Rome, slows down. So we can see all the details on how the gospel got to the heart of the empire.
Right. That's good. That's good. All right. Do you want to get to the next section, Caleb? What do we got going on here? Starting at verse 12.
Yeah, so this is where the Jews decide to take an oath that they're not going to eat or drink until they kill Paul.
Which, yeah, that wasn't wise.
No. It was an interesting oath.
Yeah. So we have these group of Jews saying, "Hey, let's go ahead and make an oath saying we're not going to eat or drink until we just assassinate and kill Paul, until we murder Paul." Mm-hmm. So my first thought was like, "Boy, how do you know they're gonna? What if they don't? What if they don't?" But then I started thinking maybe it's they'll really be persuaded to kill him once they're on like day 5 with no food.
No, they
No drink.
Oh yeah, that's right. So they're just gonna kamikaze themselves in there.
They saved a lot of money on groceries.
They did. Oh, that's great. So let's see. I'm just going to kind of hurry up through here. And I think some of the stuff that I had underlined, we'll just skip over. That's okay. They didn't kill Paul, by the way, these guys. That's, I guess, where I'm going to go straight.
So what did they do with their vow?
That's right. And why I wanted to focus a little bit on this vow making is it shows their standard of truth and what they use to actually live their lives. If you're using scripture, using the Torah, which they should be using, and you think that they're using that to make this vow their standard of living, they would have starved to death. You brought up when we were prepping for the show, Jephthah in Judges, when he makes a vow. You can explain it better than I can.
So Jephthah, what he does is he has this battle and he wants to win. And he makes a vow. Hey, whenever I get back, the first thing that I see, I will sacrifice to Yahweh.
Unwise.
And then because it's an open, like,
right,
what's going to happen. And when he gets back, his daughter comes out of the house. And that's the first thing he sees. And so he sacrifices his daughter.
Right. Unwise vow.
And he has to keep it.
He does have to keep it.
Because he vowed to Yahweh.
And people are going to be like, oh, he didn't really sacrifice his daughter. I'm convinced that he actually
How can
did.
we soften the Bible?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's yeah. Anyway, okay, that's another rabbit hole. So did these guys starve to death? I don't think they did, because at this time we have these group of people probably listening to the Mishnah rather than the Torah. They had another book that they were interpreting the Old Testament through. Much like we have the New Testament interpreting the Old Testament for us, they have other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'm going to be really clear on this. I know
Yeah.
we've talked about it in past episodes, but because there are so many Christians who are looking to Judaism for how should we be living out our faith, it's important to realize that, like, Talmudic Judaism or Mishnah is in opposition to New Testament.
Right.
I mean, I hesitate to call it Judaism because that can be it's perceived a different way.
Right.
But let's just call it the way of following, the Bible.
Yeah.
You have the Mishnah or Talmud versus the New Testament. So we can't look to the Mishnah and the Talmud as instruction for how we should live our lives, because it's in opposition to the New Testament.
Right.
As you were about to explain
Yes.
with these people.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm glad you clarified that. So yeah, we're looking through the New Testament lens. They're looking through Mishnah and the Talmud for understanding how to live lives. So in the Mishnah, it actually states that if a vow was impossible to fulfill, now I'm not quoting verbatim here, paraphrasing, that if a vow was impossible to fulfill, they would be released from it. And that's the Mishnah Nedarim 3:3. Mm-hmm. So these guys probably didn't starve to death. They're just like, we'll just get out of it. It was impossible.
Do you think they knew that before they made that oath?
I'm
It's
sure.
like, well, just in case.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was in the back of their mind that they're like, we're really not going to starve.
And to be clear, I don't believe the Mishnah is actually totally written by this point. It still would have been in its oral form, but that would have been the standard they would have been living by.
Right. So we can now see where Christ is giving woes and to the Pharisees in the Gospels. Like, you're living to another standard. You're not really understanding what the Old Testament is because you're going by laws of man, not the laws of God. So we just wanted to bring that out.
Yeah. So can I briefly explain Paul's escape here?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. In the Protestant world, we tend to elevate Paul to a demigod. And what we're going to see here is that he's actually kind of human. He has this nephew who picks up on this plot to kill Paul. And you don't think of Paul having a nephew oftentimes, but here his nephew just kind of shows up and saves the day and says, hey, there's this plot to kill Paul. We should do something about this. And then he receives all this extra protection, and they transport him and get him out of there.
Yeah, he receives extra protection because of his citizenship. So again,
Yeah.
he uses uses wisdom and cunning. He's cunning in what he's doing, in the position that he's at to come out alive. So yeah, that's great. So he shuffled off to Felix. That's the governor of Judah at the time, the Roman governor of Judah. So yeah. And I think that's where we're going to land the plane, unless you guys have anything else.
This is just a real quick comment. So this is Claudius II, the governor of Felix. And he says, this man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them when I came upon them with the soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. I just think it's hilarious that the way that Claudius reframes the events, like that's not how it happened. If you go back to Acts 21, it wasn't like he's like, I hear this Roman soldier's in trouble. Let's go rescue him. That's not what happened. Like, he's like, what in the world is going on? Like,
Must be
grab
the
this guy.
Egyptian. This must be the Egyptian.
So I just think it's funny how he totally reframes the story.
That's pretty great. All right. Any closing remarks, Caleb?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm good.
Well, this is it. That was Acts chapter 23. I'm gonna really double down. You guys should check us out on Rumble. It's we're really trying to promote that. So check us out on Rumble. Like, subscribe, comment, share it with your friends. Thanks for watching the 17:6 podcast, where we help you turn the world upside down by the Lordship of Christ.